Most people study how to make money. Rockefeller studied how to control it. He didn't chase wealth. He built a system that made money chase him. And what he discovered over a century ago still holds the power to turn ordinary people into legends of prosperity today. Before we begin, let me ask you something. If this resonates with you in any way, leave your mark below. Not for me, for yourself. Because the act of acknowledging what you're about to receive changes something in you. It's a silent contract with your own evolution. There's a story told in the old merchant guilds about two brothers who inherited the same amount of gold. The first brother spent his days counting it, polishing it, moving it from chest to chest, terrified someone might steal it. The second brother never touched his gold. Instead, he studied the patterns of the river that ran through town. He watched where water pooled, where it flowed fastest, where it carved new paths. Within 10 years, the first brother's gold had halved in value through inflation and poor decisions made in panic. The second brother owned the river. Not literally, of course, but he owned the mills beside it, the land it irrigated, the transport routes it enabled. His original gold? Still sitting untouched in a vault somewhere. He didn't need it anymore. The river was making him wealthier every single day. This is what Rockefeller understood that most people never will. Wealth isn't about accumulating resources. It's about positioning yourself in the flow of resources. It's about architecture, not acquisition. When John D. Rockefeller was a young bookkeeper earning less than $4 a week, he did something strange, something most people would call insane. He gave away 10% of everything he made. Not after he became rich, before. When those few coins meant the difference between eating well or going hungry. His friends thought he'd lost his mind. His father called him a fool. But Rockefeller had discovered something most people spend their entire lives running from: the principle of circulation. Listen carefully to this. Money is not a thing. It's a flow. It's energy in motion. And energy that doesn't move becomes stagnant, toxic, eventually worthless. Rockefeller understood that the moment you clench your fist around money in fear, you've already lost it. Not physically, but spiritually. You've transformed yourself from a channel into a dam. And dams, no matter how strong, eventually crack under pressure. This is where most people destroy themselves without realizing it. They finally get some money, and their first instinct is to hold it so tight it can barely breathe. They stop buying the coffee they enjoy. They stop investing in their own education. They stop helping others. They tell themselves they're being responsible, being smart, being disciplined. But what they're actually doing is sending a signal to the universe, to their own subconscious, to every opportunity around them. I am in scarcity. I am afraid. I don't believe more is coming. And the universe, being the perfect mirror that it is, responds accordingly. No more comes. Rockefeller's first principle wasn't about making money. It was about understanding that wealth is attracted to those who treat it like an honored guest passing through, not a prisoner to be locked away. He gave away 10% because he was establishing himself as a conduit, not a container. He was saying to reality itself, I am a channel through which abundance flows. I am safe for prosperity to move through. And reality believed him. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Most people think Rockefeller's genius was in oil, in business strategy, in monopolistic practices. And yes, he was brilliant at all of that. But that wasn't the source of his power. The source of his power was his relationship with fear. There's a moment that happened in 1857 that most historians gloss over, but it tells you everything. Rockefeller was 16 years old. The entire financial system of America collapsed. Banks failed overnight. Companies evaporated. Fortunes turned to dust. People were jumping out of windows. And young Rockefeller, who had saved exactly $50, watched all of this with curious detachment. While everyone around him was drowning in panic, he was studying the pattern. He was watching what survived and what didn't, what behaviors led to ruin, and what behaviors led to opportunity. He noticed something crucial. The people who panicked, who made desperate moves, who abandoned their principles to chase quick salvation, they all got destroyed. Every single one. But the people who stayed calm, who stuck to their systems, who saw the crisis as a reorganization rather than an ending, they not only survived, they positioned themselves to dominate the next era. This became his second principle. Never make financial decisions from a state of fear. Never. Not once. Not even when it seems like the only logical move, because fear makes you stupid. Fear makes you short-sighted. Fear makes you abandon the exact strategies that would save you if you just held them a little longer. Think about your own life right now. How many opportunities have you rejected because you were afraid? How many investments in yourself have you postponed because the timing wasn't perfect? How many times have you chosen the safe, comfortable path over the one that terrified you but, deep down, you knew would change everything? Rockefeller built Standard Oil during depressions, recessions, panics, and crashes. Not despite them. Because of them. While everyone else was paralyzed, he was moving. While everyone else was selling in desperation, he was buying with precision. While everyone else was looking at what they were losing, he was looking at what was being reorganized. And here's the part that will make you uncomfortable. He was often buying from the very people who had mocked him, who had called him cheap, who had said his cautious approach was too slow, too boring, too safe. The same people who were making fortunes in good times and losing everything in bad times. They laughed at him during the feasts. They begged him for mercy during the famines. This brings us to his third principle, and it's the one most people can't stomach. Separate your emotions from your economics. Completely. Totally. Without compromise. Rockefeller could shake your hand with genuine warmth, ask about your family, pray with you on Sunday, and then absolutely destroy your business on Monday if the numbers demanded it. This wasn't cruelty. This was clarity. He understood that business is a system, not a friendship. Money is a tool, not a moral statement. Profit is feedback from reality, not a judgment of character. Most people can't do this. They let their need to be liked compromise their judgment. They let their guilt about success sabotage their growth. They let their fear of being seen as greedy prevent them from claiming what they've earned. And then they wonder why they're stuck while others seem to glide forward effortlessly. Rockefeller had a phrase he used. The ability to deal with people is as purchasable a commodity as sugar or coffee. And I will pay more for that ability than for any other under the sun. Notice what he's saying. He didn't say loyalty is purchasable. He didn't say friendship is purchasable. He said the ability to deal with people, the skill, the function. He kept it clean. He kept it professional. He kept it separate from his need for emotional validation. This is where most entrepreneurs destroy their own companies. They hire their friends instead of the competent. They keep toxic employees because they don't want to hurt feelings. They make terrible deals because they want to be seen as generous. They confuse kindness with weakness and boundaries with cruelty. Rockefeller was kind. Genuinely kind. He gave away more money than most people will ever see in 10 lifetimes. But his kindness was intentional, systematic, and completely separated from his business decisions. He didn't give to people who failed because he felt sorry for them. He gave to causes that multiplied impact because he understood leverage. And this is his fourth principle. Everything is about leverage. Everything. Time is leverage. Information is leverage. Relationships are leverage. Reputation is leverage. Money is just the most obvious form of leverage, so it's what most people focus on. But Rockefeller knew that if you build the other forms of leverage first, money becomes almost inevitable. He spent years, decades even, building systems while earning relatively modest returns. Standard Oil wasn't profitable for a long time. His partners were getting nervous. His investors were getting impatient. Everyone wanted immediate results. But Rockefeller was building something else. He was building inevitability. He was constructing a machine where every part reinforced every other part. Where the refineries fed the distribution fed the retail fed the refineries. Where every competitor who tried to enter the market found themselves not fighting a company, but fighting an ecosystem, an organism. Something that responded and adapted faster than any single entity could. This is what people miss when they study Rockefeller. They see monopoly. They see ruthlessness. They see greed. But what they should be seeing is systems thinking at a level so sophisticated it's almost spiritual. He wasn't trying to win transactions. He was trying to make winning automatic. He was trying to build a structure where success was the path of least resistance. Now, let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a vast forest. Most people, when they want wood, they go into the forest, find a tree, cut it down, drag it back. Exhausting. Slow. Limited. Rockefeller looked at that same forest and thought, what if I owned every path through the forest? What if every tree that anyone cut down had to use my tools, travel on my roads, be processed at my mill? I don't need to cut down a single tree myself. I just need to position myself where the wood flows. This is fifth principle. Control the choke points, not the commodity. Don't compete in the crowded market. Compete for the infrastructure the market depends on. Don't be the restaurant. Be the landlord of the building all the restaurants need. Don't be the creator. Be the platform the creators need. Don't be the oil well. Be the only railroad that can transport the oil. Comment below if you've ever realized you were competing in the wrong arena. If you've ever felt like you were working 3 times as hard as someone else for a third of the results. Because chances are they weren't smarter than you. They were just positioned better. They found the choke point. You were still in the forest cutting trees. Rockefeller's competitors would discover oil fields and celebrate. He would buy the only railway that connected to that oil field and wait. They would drill and pump and work themselves to exhaustion. And then they would realize, with slowly dawning horror, that they had no way to get their oil to market except through him. And he would offer them a price. Not a fair price, not a generous price, but the only price. And they would take it. Because the alternative was watching their entire investment rot in the ground. Was it fair? That's the wrong question. The right question is, was it a natural consequence of superior positioning? And the answer is absolutely yes. This is what makes most people uncomfortable about Rockefeller. He exposed the truth that society doesn't want to face. The game isn't fair, it was never meant to be fair, and pretending it's fair only hurts the people naive enough to believe it. Fairness is a social construct. Leverage is a law of nature, and nature doesn't care about your feelings. But here's where Rockefeller separates from the simple predators. He understood something profound about the long game. His sixth principle, your reputation is your most valuable asset, and it takes decades to build and seconds to destroy. Despite all his ruthless business practices, Rockefeller was obsessed with being seen as a man of honor. He paid his debts. He kept his word. He showed up on time. He dressed well. He never drank. He never gambled. He went to church every Sunday without fail. Not because he was trying to manipulate people, though it certainly helped, but because he genuinely believed that discipline in small things created discipline in large things. There's a famous story about him. During one particularly brutal business battle, one of his competitors spread a rumor that Rockefeller had cheated on a contract. The rumor was false, completely fabricated. Most people would have fought back aggressively, would have countered with their own rumors, would have gotten down in the mud. Rockefeller did something different. He said nothing publicly, but privately, quietly, methodically, he gathered documentation. Every contract, every receipt, every witness. And then, months later, when his competitor had forgotten about it, had moved on to other attacks, Rockefeller released everything at once. Undeniable, comprehensive, devastating. The competitor was ruined, not because Rockefeller destroyed his business, though he certainly could have, but because no one would trust him anymore. No one would lend to him. No one would partner with him. He had exposed himself as a liar, and in the world of high-level commerce, that's a death sentence. Rockefeller never had to mention it again. The market did the work for him. This is the power of reputation properly maintained. It fights your battles for you. It opens doors before you knock. It makes people want to give you opportunities because being associated with you elevates them. But reputation without substance is just marketing. And Rockefeller understood this. His seventh principle: master your craft at a level that makes competition irrelevant. People remember him as an oil man. But before he touched oil, he was the best bookkeeper most people had ever seen. Not good, the best. He could look at a ledger and see patterns others missed. He could spot inefficiency like a bloodhound smells fear. He could track every penny through a maze of transactions and tell you exactly where it went wrong. This obsession with precision became his foundation. When he entered the oil business, he didn't just learn about drilling. He learned chemistry, geology, transportation logistics, the psychology of negotiation, finance at a level that made bankers nervous. He became so competent that people had no choice but to deal with him on his terms, because there was simply no one else who understood the entire ecosystem the way he did. Most people today are trying to win with half knowledge. They watch a few videos, read a summary, take a weekend course, and think they're ready to compete with people who've spent decades mastering their domain. And then they're surprised when they get destroyed. Shocked when the market doesn't reward their mediocre effort. Rockefeller would have found this attitude incomprehensible. In his world, mastery wasn't optional. It was the minimum requirement for survival. His eighth principle emerges from this: patience is violence against mediocrity. Most people hear patience and think of passive waiting. That's not patience. That's cowardice dressed in spiritual language. Real patience is active. It's the willingness to do the boring, repetitive work that creates exponential results later. It's the violence of saying no to immediate gratification so you can say yes to permanent transformation. Rockefeller spent years negotiating railroad rates. Not months, years. The same conversation, over and over. Most people would have given up after the third rejection. He treated each rejection as data, as one more lesson in the PhD program of his own education. And when he finally got those rates, when he finally locked in the deals that would define the industry for generations, his competitors didn't even understand what had happened. The game had changed while they were sleeping. Think about what you've given up on because it was taking too long. That business idea you abandoned after 6 months. That skill you stopped practicing because you weren't seeing results. Now imagine if you had stayed. Where would you be right now? There's a reason most people don't build generational wealth. They won't endure the years of invisible progress. They won't tolerate the season of planting without harvesting. They won't accept that the first decade of building something meaningful looks identical to failure from the outside. Rockefeller planted trees he knew he'd never sit under. He built systems that would feed his great-grandchildren. This is his 9th principle. Think in generations, not quarters. The moment your time horizon extends past your own lifespan, you start making completely different decisions. You stop optimizing for comfort and start building for legacy. This is where modern business advice fails catastrophically. It's all about the quick win, the growth hack, the shortcut. And yes, leverage matters. But if your entire strategy is built on shortcuts, you're not building an empire. You're building a house of cards in a windstorm. Rockefeller's empire survived his death by over a century. His systems are still generating wealth. His foundations are still changing the world. Not because he was lucky, but because he built with permanence in mind. Now, here's the principle that will separate those who merely understand from those who actually transform. His 10th principle: execute in silence until success makes the noise. Rockefeller didn't announce his plans. He didn't seek validation. He moved in the shadows, accumulated position after position, and by the time people realized what he was building, it was already too late to stop him. Every time you announce your intentions, you release the energy needed to achieve them. Every time you seek applause for starting, you steal from the applause you'd get for finishing. Every time you tell people what you're going to do, you trigger their doubt, their jealousy, their fear, and you absorb all of that into your own field. Rockefeller understood that the market rewards results, not intentions, so he stopped talking and started building. And when he finally emerged with Standard Oil fully formed, the world had no choice but to acknowledge what he'd created. Comment below if you're working on something in silence right now. If you're building while everyone else is talking, because those are the people who are going to win. Not might win, will win. But here's where it gets deeper. Rockefeller didn't just work in silence because of strategy. His 11th principle: your internal state determines your external results, and noise disrupts the internal state. He was fanatically protective of his peace. He didn't read newspapers during market panics. He didn't attend social events that drained his energy. He created a bubble of calm around himself that nothing could penetrate. People thought he was cold, detached, but he was protected. He understood that if you let the chaos of the world into your mind, it will destroy your ability to think clearly. And if you can't think clearly, you can't see opportunities. This is the hidden trap that destroys most people. They're so addicted to stimulation, to drama, to the emotional roller coaster of reacting to everything, that they never develop the stillness required for strategic thinking. They're always responding, never initiating. Always playing checkers while Rockefeller was playing chess on a board they couldn't even see. He had a practice that most people would find unbearable. Every major decision, he would sleep on it. Not once, multiple times. He would sit with the decision, examine it from every angle, and only after his emotions had completely settled would he act. This drove his partners insane. They wanted quick decisions, fast moves, aggressive expansion. He gave them deliberate, calculated, almost painfully slow precision. And he was right every single time. This is his 12th principle. Speed is overrated. Precision is eternal. In a world obsessed with velocity, Rockefeller chose accuracy. And accuracy, over time, creates a compounding advantage that speed can never match. But precision requires something most people refuse to develop: self-knowledge. You can't make precise decisions if you don't know your own biases, your own fears, your own patterns of self-sabotage. Rockefeller spent as much time studying himself as he did studying markets. He knew when he was making decisions from ego. He knew when fear was masquerading as prudence. This level of self-awareness is rare because it's uncomfortable. It requires you to see your own darkness. Most people would rather blame the market, blame the timing, blame anything except the person in the mirror. Rockefeller looked in the mirror constantly. And what he saw there, he refined. Endlessly. Ruthlessly. Now we arrive at his most controversial principle. His 13th. Sentimentality is expensive, and you can't afford it until you're wealthy enough to absorb the cost. He fired loyal employees who were no longer effective. He broke partnerships that were no longer profitable. He abandoned markets that were no longer viable. And he did all of this without guilt, without hesitation. This sounds harsh until you understand what happens when you don't do this. When you keep dead weight out of loyalty, you're being cruel to everyone else who has to carry that weight. When you stay in bad partnerships out of guilt, you're being dishonest about reality. When you cling to failing ventures out of pride, you're not being persistent. You're being stubborn. Rockefeller made the hard cuts early, cleanly, and completely. And because he did, he had resources available for the opportunities that mattered. Most people are buried under the weight of decisions they should have unmade years ago. Businesses they should have closed. Relationships they should have ended. Habits they should have killed. You can't fly with anchors, no matter how sentimental you are about the chains. But here's the nuance. Rockefeller wasn't heartless. He was surgical. And once he had built his empire, once he had secured his position, he gave away more money than almost anyone in history. He funded universities, medical research, scientific advancement. He understood that sentimentality earned too early destroys you, but compassion exercised from strength transforms the world. This brings us to his 14th principle. Master the game, then change the rules. For the first half of his life, Rockefeller played by the rules of his era, ruthlessly, completely. He dominated so thoroughly that the rules themselves had to change. Antitrust laws were literally written because of him. And then, once the game had changed, once his empire was secure, he pivoted. He became the benevolent patriarch, the wise philanthropist. People called him a hypocrite. But he wasn't. He was a strategist. He understood that the rules of accumulation and the rules of distribution are completely different. First, he took, completely. Then, he gave, generously. And because he had mastered both phases, his impact multiplied in ways that neither pure greed nor pure altruism could ever achieve alone. This is the final truth. Wealth is responsibility, not reward. The money isn't the point. The money is just the scoreboard that tells you you've mastered the game. What you do with that mastery, how you deploy that leverage, that's what actually matters. Rockefeller knew this. In his later years, he said, "I believe the power to make money is a gift from God." Notice he didn't say the money itself was the gift, the power to generate it. And if it's a gift, then it comes with an obligation to use it well. This is where most people who study Rockefeller get it wrong. They see the ruthlessness and think that's the whole story. But the ruthlessness was just the first chapter. The real story is what came after. The transformation from the most feared businessman in America to one of its greatest benefactors. You don't apologize for winning, but you don't worship winning either. You win completely, and then you use that victory to create something that matters. You master the game so thoroughly that you earn the right to play a bigger game. The principles are clear. Circulation over hoarding. Systems over heroics. Precision over speed. leverage over labor, reputation over revenge, mastery over mediocrity, patience over panic, legacy over luxury, silence over performance, stillness over chaos, clarity over sentimentality, strategy over stubbornness, and finally, responsibility over reward. These aren't business tactics. They're the architecture of power itself, decoded and handed to you. What you do with them is your choice. But understand this: once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you understand how the game really works, playing small becomes impossible. The world is reorganizing right now, just like it did in Rockefeller's time. Fortunes are being made and lost, empires are rising and falling, and the people who are positioning themselves correctly, who are thinking in systems instead of transactions, who are building for generations instead of quarters, they're going to inherit everything. The question is, will you be one of them? Here's the initiate. See you in the next video.